Take a seat, please. Record reflect all our jurors are back. You may notice every time y'all walk in the room, we stand up. That's the way that we can say thank you for your service and show that we respect you because you're the judges of facts and the law I give to you. So every time you walk in, you'll see us jump up. That's what we do. All right, who's be the next witness?
Cody Rowlett.
Okay. We'll step up here, please, sir. You'll raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. If you have a seat, and you can tell me your first name and last name, spell them both.
Yes, sir. My name is Cody, C-O-D-Y, Rowlett, R-O-W-L-E-T-T.
Thank you. Questions?
By whom are you employed, Mr. Rowlett?
I'm employed with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation in the Nashville Crime Laboratory.
And what is your position there?
I am a special agent forensic scientist assigned to the latent print unit.
All right, describe for the ladies and gentlemen what latent prints are.
Sure. So on the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet, there's specialized skin called friction ridge skin. Biologically, it helps you increase your grip with what you're holding on to. That skin is unique to each of us. It's commonly referred to as a fingerprint. And as a result of that, we can use that to link subjects back to prints left behind at crime scenes.
And what is your training and education that gives you the knowledge to testify as an expert in this regard?
So I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Tennessee Tech University, as well as a certification in medical laboratory science from Vanderbilt University Medical Center. I have also completed an extensive 13-month in-house training program with the TBI latent print unit.
Your Honor, I would offer him as an expert in the area of latent prints. And Special Agent Rowlett, have you been provided some evidence to review and render an opinion on in this matter?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
And numerous items of evidence were submitted to you for testing.
That's correct.
And just give the ladies and gentlemen a little information about how you go about attempting to identify prints, and then if you find an identifiable print, how you might match it to an individual.
Okay. That process depends on the type of evidence. Generally speaking, there are two types of evidence. One is called non-porous evidence, which is things like plastics and metals and glass. That would be something like the surface of this table where the latent print will reside on the surface and can be wiped off, for example. The second type is called porous, which are things like paper, cardboard, where the latent print actually soaks into the item. So based on what type of evidence it is, we will process it accordingly. If it is a non-porous item, such as this desk, we would use a series of light-based techniques to locate any fingerprints on the item, and then we would photograph it to preserve it. Whereas if it was a paper item, such as money, we would use a chemical test to preserve it.
Do you always find identifiable prints on objects that you examine?
Not always, no.
Is it unusual that you don't find identifiable prints?
No, it is not unusual to not find identifiable latent prints on items of evidence.
Is it more often than not that you don't find any identifiable prints?
Objection.
Really, it just kind of depends. Sometimes it seems like I have a lot of positive cases, sometimes a lot of negative. It kind of varies. It's hard to say whether one or more is predominant than the other.
Okay. And in this particular case, you've had an opportunity to review the investigation that you did and the evidence submitted to you. And there was one particular item marked Lab Exhibit number 24A, a knife that you were able to identify a print.
That's correct. There was a knife, and I was able to find an identifiable print and identified it.
Okay, and who was that identifiable print linked to?
So first, when I had the print, I compared it to the known individuals in the case. That would be Jerry Don Ridge and Angela Denise Kilgore. The conclusion on that was excluded, which means that neither of them left the print behind on that knife. So I searched the print against our state database. It's called AFIS. It stands for Automated Fingerprint Identification System. All the fingerprint cards in the state are in that database, and we have the ability to search unknowns against that. As a result of that search, I had the name Jeremiah Tothero from the APHIS search, and I did eventually identify it to that individual.
Okay, and did you convey that information to law enforcement?
Yes, that was issued out in my report dated 5/26/16.
Okay, and even though you didn't find Mr. Ridge's identifiable print on there, or the defendant Angela Kilgore's print on there, does that mean that neither of those individuals handled that knife?
Objection. Speculation.
What is it?
Speculation.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
You did not identify Jerry Ridge's print on that knife.
No, I did not.
Does that mean he never handled that knife?
That does not mean that. It just means that he didn't leave behind an identifiable latent print on that knife.
Same for Ms. Kilgore. You did not identify a print that matched her print to that knife.
Correct.
Does that mean she never handled that knife?
It does not mean that.
Okay. And there were other numerous items, particularly what's been marked and entered already into evidence, the TBI lab number 15A, a glove, a purple glove that was recovered from the crime scene.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to find any identifiable print on that glove?
No, based on my report, it says examination failed to reveal the presence of any latent print ridge detail on Exhibit 015-A, which basically means there was no, sometimes we can see like partial prints on items of evidence. For the glove in particular, we didn't find anything at all, no ridges whatsoever.
And as far as not finding any prints on that glove, that doesn't mean no one wore it, does it?
That's correct. It's pretty uncommon to develop prints on gloves. It's not a great surface, but we still do try.
And were you able to identify from the other items that were submitted to you any other identifiable prints?
No, ma'am. In all the evidence in this case, it was just the one print on the knife that was identifiable. There was a lot of handling across all the items, which means the small partial prints, but as far as being able to tell who they came from, it was just the one.
Thank you.
And Mr. Rowlett, you were part of the VCRT team that went to the pawn shop, correct?
That's correct. I worked the crime scene. Yes, sir.
Okay, so not only you went from the crime scene, but you were busy in the lab analyzing for prints.
That's correct.
And also you kind of knew what you were looking for at the crime scene because you are an expert in latent print, correct?
That's correct. I processed the scene for latent prints.
Okay. And in all the evidence, you only found one print linked to somebody else in this case, correct?
Only one latent print was developed from the evidence in this case. That's correct.
Other questions? Thanks for your setting up. Thank you.
Russell Davis. Russell Davis. You should be right out there.
Just up here, please, sir. You work for the back end. Swear to us. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes, sir. Thank you. See, please give your first name and last name and spell it out.
James Russell Davis II, James Davis.
Thank you. Question, Counsel.
I don't know whether to call you Agent Davis. Are you still Agent Davis?
No, ma'am, I am
Okay.
retired.
Where did you used to work, Mr. Davis?
I was employed at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation Crime Laboratory as a special agent forensic scientist. I currently still work there part-time as what's called a contract employee.
Okay.
My title is forensic scientist, doing basically the same thing I did for 35 years.
How long were you employed with TBI before you retired?
35 years.
35 years. And a good number of those years did you spend in the area of microanalysis?
The entire time.
Okay. And if you would give us the benefit, a little bit of your training and experience that qualifies you to testify and an expert in that field, please.
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry from the University of Tennessee at Martin, and the coursework toward a master's degree in chemistry at Middle Tennessee State University. I came into the crime laboratory and completed an 18-month training period, and during that time and since, I've attended a number of specialized schools, mostly from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, dealing with things that are on point for what I did and still do for a living. These are things such as the analysis of glass, fibers, paint and plastic, gunshot residue, explosives, and fire debris.
And Mr. Davis, did you, Judge, I would offer him as an exhibit in the, an expert in the field of microanalysis.
Okay.
Mr. Davis, in this particular case, lots of evidence was submitted. Particularly, a gunshot residue kit was collected from the defendant, Angela Kilgore. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you receive information from that kit regarding the time that the sample was collected?
Yes, ma'am. In that kit is an information sheet where the officer or submitting agency can record a number of things. Among them are going to be who prepared the test and who and what time and what date those were taken and when the offense was believed to have occurred.
All right, and can you tell us in this particular gunshot residue kit sample that was submitted, the date and time it was collected, please?
This was collected on 5/17/16, 11:59 p.m.
And submitted to your agency for testing?
It was submitted not too long after that.
Okay. And did you perform an analysis on that gunshot residue kit?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you find?
If I might, I'll read directly from the report I prepared. Electron microscopic examination and analysis of Exhibit 36A did not reveal the presence of particles of gunshot primer residue. The absence of gunshot primer residue is consistent with an individual not having fired a weapon or being exposed to a source of gunshot primer residue. A negative result could also occur when gunshot primer residue particles are lost due to washing, excessive time interval between firearm discharge and collection, and or other routine activities.
All right. So if you would just summarize for the ladies and gentlemen here, what does that mean to us?
That means basically I did not find any particles which would indicate this person was around a weapon when it discharged or handled a weapon after it had been discharged. There's two possibilities. One, that person never was around a weapon or handled a weapon or was near a weapon when it fired, or the material that would come from a weapon when it's fired was removed from the hands by normal activity or washing or just the length of time from the time of the incident until the hand kit was processed on that person.
All right. And what are some of the factors that if, say for example, we know an individual fired a gun, and you very quickly thereafter obtained a gunshot residue kit, you tested it but found no positive, I guess, result, for lack of a better term.
Basically, if...
Speculation. I think it's an expert,
there are a number of things that can come into play with this type of analysis. The first thing, and probably the main thing, is the length of time between when a shot was fired by an individual and when that kit was collected. This material is caught on the oils of our hands. Whatever removes the oils on those hands, whether it be activity or washing or just simply time passing, it's going to disappear, usually 4 to 6 hours. I've seen a few instances where it was up to 8 or 12 hours, but the vast majority of the time, this material just goes away by virtue of losing the oils on your hands. If you have a small caliber weapon, there's not a lot of material available when the weapon fires. If you have a single shot versus multiple shots, there's just not very much material available either.
And the bullet in this case has been identified as a .25 caliber.
Yes, ma'am.
How would you characterize that as far as leaving behind the gunshot residue?
Well, that primer itself is not the smallest primer, but it's the smallest centerfire primer. There's less material in that than in something like, say, a .45 caliber weapon or a shotgun.
Okay. And Mr. Davis, would the passing of 7 to 8 hours from the firing of the gun to the collection of the kit have an effect on the accuracy of your testing?
It would have an effect on the material still being present, principally.
Okay.
The test is accurate, but
Okay.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. What about, would the fact that an individual had gloves on, would that have any effect on the gunshot residue being present when the kit was collected?
If there were gloves on, the material would not have had an opportunity to even get on the hands to be present at all.
So you wouldn't expect to find anything?
No, ma'am, I wouldn't.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman, regarding your objection, I said he's an expert. I misspoke, he's qualified as an expert. So to the jury about that determination.
Thank you, Judge.
Go ahead, sir.
Were you given a glove to test at all?
I was not.
Okay. No further questions.
Mr. Davis, in this particular case, there's been a glove introduced and it appears to be have a great deal of blood on it. Would you have been able to perform an accurate test on that type of item?
Items that are...
Again, that was speculation.
He's qualified as an expert, I think, on black and white protection.
I routinely test articles of clothing, even interiors of cars, for the presence of gunshot residue. A large amount of blood on something would preclude that particular area being tested. So if the gloves are covered in blood, I wouldn't really have an area to test on the gloves.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and sir, what would happen, well, sorry. What about if the gloves were not entirely covered with blood?
There might be some work that would be possible. Without having seen them, I can't say.
Thank you, Judge.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, sir. Good step down. You're free to say the whole before you go.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Randall Nelson, Your Honor.
Sir, if you'll step here next to me, please. Raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Go to see. You'll tell me your first name, your last name, and spell them both.
My first name is Randall, R-A-N-D-A-L-L. Last name is Nelson, N-E-L-S-O-N.
Go ahead, Councilman.
And Agent Nelson, by whom are you employed?
I'm employed with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation Crime Laboratory in Nashville.
And what is your position there?
I'm employed with the laboratory as a special agent forensic scientist, and I've been employed with the laboratory for almost 30 years.
And in what area of expertise do you practice at the TBI Crime Lab?
I'm assigned to the trace evidence or microanalysis unit of the laboratory, and within that unit we do a number of different types of analyses. In particular, I do paint comparisons, glass comparisons, unknown substance analysis, as well as analyzing fire debris for the purpose of identifying ignitable liquids.
And if you would give us the benefit of your training and education that led you to become an expert in this field.
Sure. I graduated from David Lipscomb College in Nashville with a Bachelor of Arts degree in chemistry. When I have completed graduate coursework in chemistry at Middle Tennessee State University, and I have received a master's degree in forensic science administration from Oklahoma State University. I was employed at the laboratory, and in the process of being in the laboratory, we go through a period of a training program within the laboratory where you learn the processes of doing a particular analysis, as well as the background information about the material that you're analyzing, how to do that. We do various tests and competency tests to show that you're capable of performing that analysis, and all that culminates with a mock case and a mock trial to show that you're competent in doing that particular analysis.
Your Honor, I would tender him as an expert in the field of microanalysis.
Go, Judge.
All right, I'll let him give his opinion.
And Agent Sergeant Nelson, in this particular case, did you receive items of evidence to examine for the presence of, I guess,
Ignitable liquids.
ignitable liquids?
Yes, ma'am, I did. Actually, we received I received about 12 different samples in this particular case.
Okay. And were you able to identify some of those items as containing ignitable liquids?
Yes, ma'am. I think there were 3 of them that I was able to actually make an identification on.
All right, and if you would, and you probably need to refer to your report, could you describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the type of testing that you did and on what items you found in the evidence?
Okay, basically what we do to find any ignitable liquids is we have the evidence submitted to us in some sort of airtight or container, usually a metal paint can. And so once we receive the metal paint cans into the laboratory, we then put in the top of the can a small piece of activated charcoal. Then we seal the can back up, put it in an oven, and let it heat up overnight. And in the morning we take the cans out and let them cool down and remove the activated charcoal from the can. Place that piece of activated charcoal into a small vial where we rinse it with a solvent that then we can inject that solvent into an instrument that we have that will allow us to analyze whatever was on that activated charcoal. And so anything that's volatile in the can will become a vapor while it's in the oven, and then it'll adhere to that piece of activated charcoal. And so then we can analyze whatever was collected by that piece of charcoal on our instrument, and then we take the data from that and interpret it to determine if there are any ignitable liquids in that particular exhibit. So in this case, there were 3 exhibits that actually had that I identified some sort of ignitable liquid or not ignitable liquid residue. The first one was my exhibit 1A.
And that was a gas can.
And that was a gas can from a parking lot. And I determined that my analysis revealed the presence of a heavy petroleum distillate. Products in this range include, but are not limited to, kerosene, diesel fuel, fuel oils number 1 and 2, Jet A or aviation fuel, some charcoal starters, some torch fuels, some paint thinners, some solvents for insecticides and poisons, and some lamp oils.
Okay, and so that was contained within that gas?
That would have been yeah, I believe, if I remember correctly, the can was empty. Okay. And so I rinsed it with a solvent and just analyzed that rinse.
All right. So you concluded that it would have contained?
There was a residue of a heavy petroleum distillate in there.
All right. And lab exhibit number 20A.
Right. So exhibit number 20A was some burned paper receipts from the crime scene. And that analysis revealed the presence of a medium petroleum distillate. And so products in this particular range include, but not limited to, mineral spirits, paint thinners, some charcoal starters, dry cleaning solvents, some torch fuels, again, some solvents for insecticides and polishes, and some lamp oils. And I put a note there that sometimes medium petroleum distillates are used in the manufacturing of carbonless paper forms. And so since these were paper receipts, I felt like I needed to put that statement in there so we understood that it could possibly have come from, if these were carbonless paper forms, that it might have come from that as well.
Okay. And exhibit number 21A, and ladies and gentlemen have heard about that. I believe it was a Zippo lighter fluid can.
It was a lighter fluid can.
Crime scene also.
And so I analyzed the liquid that was in that lighter fluid can, and the analysis of that liquid revealed the presence of a light petroleum distillate. And so products in this range include, but are not limited to, petroleum ethers, cigarette lighter fluids, some rubber sealant solvents, Skelly solvents, VM and P naphtha, and some camping fuels.
So what was left in that can could have been consistent with what was on the outside of the can as Zippo lighter fluid?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because that is a cigarette lighter fluid.
Okay. And you did examine some other items, particularly appeared some burned clothing that came from the victim, Jerry Ridge.
That's correct.
And did not find ignitable liquid residue on those items?
No, ma'am, I did not.
But they were obviously burned.
I believe that's correct, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So would there be an explanation, even though hypothetically someone had poured ignitable liquid onto the body with that clothing on it, if that clothing burned and the body burned, would that contribute to the lack of the ignitable fluid being present?
That is a possibility. I mean, there's any number of possibilities why we would not find ignitable liquid on a particular item of clothing. It could be that there was not any ignitable liquid there to start with. It could be that the ignitable liquid was there, but it was burned up in the process of the fire. It could be that the ignitable liquid was there, but it got washed away in the process of putting out the fire, or it got moved around in the process of the fire. The firefighters trying to put out the fire. Sometimes things will get moved around, and so it may be difficult to find exactly the spot where the ignitable liquid is or was at the time that it was placed. So there are a variety of reasons why it potentially could be that there was an ignitable liquid there for me to analyze.
And the same, there were some shoes from a bag found in the defendant's truck. You weren't able to localize any particular items on those.
That's correct.
And what about a pair of brown leather boots that were taken from the person of Angela Kilgore? Your exhibit number 048A.
On that particular one, my analysis revealed a presence of something, but I couldn't identify it or classify it due to the deteriorated condition of the sample. So it probably evaporated to the point where it was beyond our capability to classify. So I don't know what it was, but I found some things in there that might have been a ignitable liquid, but I can't say for sure because it was beyond our ability to actually classify.
Thank you, sir.
With regard to the leather boots, there was a present, but you have of ignitable liquid, but you have no idea where it could have come from. Would that be correct?
Well, since I couldn't even identify it, classify it, I wouldn't have any idea of what it was or what it would have come from.
Good. Could it simply come from a gas station or asphalt, any type of asphalt arc or anything like that? Would that be fair?
I mean, if it had been gasoline, yeah, or you could have picked it up, somewhere. Asphalt is different altogether.
Okay. And with regard to the receipt book, that could have been nothing, no accelerant used on that. Would that be fair? And just a match put to the receipt book. That would be fair, correct?
I'm not sure exactly what. Are you saying that you could have lit with just a match and caused those papers to burn?
And that be consistent with your findings?
Well, again, I found a medium petroleum distillate in there, and again, some carbonless forms have those medium petroleum distillates in the manufacturing process. So I can't say where that particular product came from, whether it was from the forms themselves or whether it was from something being put there.
And that was a carbonless form?
I'm not sure what it was, but I had to put that in there because I wasn't sure what kind of papers those were.
Okay. And the gas stand was consistent with gas being in there, correct?
And which exhibit?
The first one, the gas can?
The gas can had a heavy petroleum distillate in it, so it was not a gasoline.
Okay.
It was more like diesel fuel or kerosene or something like that.
Okay. Nothing further.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You step down. Please state the formal free bill.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Steve Collins.
We'll step up here, sit next to me. Please raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. You have a seat right there. If you'll tell me your first name and last name, and spell them both.
My name is Stephen Collins, S-T-E-P-H-E-N, Collins, C-O-L-L-I-N-S.
Thanks, sir. Questions?
And Mr. Collins, where do you work?
I work for the Tennessee Department of Corrections with probation and parole.
And what is your position there?
I'm a probation parole officer.
And how long have you been with the Department of Corrections?
About 3.5 years.
And were you so employed in May of 2016?
I was.
And were you separating or supervising a Jeremiah Tutherow?
I was.
And he was on your probation?
He was.
And Mr. Collins, where do you actually work? Where's your physical location for probation?
Where I was supervising, the physical address was Campbell County, Tennessee, and Jacksboro.
And Jacksboro is north of here, is that right?
Yes.
About how long would it take to drive from Jacksboro to Marion County, Jasper area?
I don't know the exact amount, but it was about an hour, about 45 minutes north of Knoxville. So however long it takes from here to Knoxville, at 45 minutes.
And did you have the occasion to meet with Jeremiah Tutherow the afternoon of May the 17th of 2016?
Yes, I did.
And approximately what time did you meet with him?
It was around about 5 o'clock.
And did he show up at your location in Jacksboro?
He did.
And what time was he supposed to be there for the meeting?
He was supposed to originally be there probably early afternoon, probably, I don't know the exact time, but I'd say probably 2 or so.
And that's close to 5 o'clock, and being a good state employee, were you ready to go home?
I was definitely ready to go home.
And but you actually physically talked to him that afternoon?
I did.
And you entered the, do you have a record keeping where you enter in your system to show that you had a meeting with him?
Yes, we do.
And did that day actually show that it was May the 18th?
I originally actually put it in the next day because he got there so late because my supervisor had to stay as well because we can't meet with offenders alone. So I'd actually originally put it in the 18th because it auto-populates for the day that you put a note in.
But it actually was the afternoon of May the 17th?
It was, that's correct.
And Jacksboro, does that operate on Eastern time?
It does.
And when you say close to 5 o'clock, would that have been Eastern time?
It would have been, yes.
So that would have been just before 4 o'clock Central time?
Yes.
And subsequent to meeting with him, were you contacted by Agent Wilson?
I was, a couple weeks
And
after.
did you advise Agent Wilson of your meeting with Mr. Tutherow?
I did.
Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Officer Collins, a couple of questions. Did you first advise law enforcement that Mr. Collins, I'm sorry, Mr. Tutherow was not in your office on that day?
I did not know. When they
Okay.
called, I told them that it was the date. I looked back, when they first contacted me to ask where he was at, that's when I realized that, I looked on his reporting form and it had the 17th.
But initially, you told him he hadn't reported. You told him he reported on the 18th, correct?
I did, yes.
So, how many days or weeks after were you first contacted?
I was first contacted, I don't remember, I'd say it was probably 2 to 3 weeks after.
Okay. And they got off the phone? Well, with John, were you ever contacted in person? Did they ever come see you in person?
Who's that? The law enforcement?
TBI?
No, they did not. They called me.
Marion County Sheriff's Department?
No, it was an agent with the TBI that called me 2 or 3 weeks later. somewhere around
Okay.
there.
And you first told him he was there on the 18th, not the 17th?
I did initially, and they were asking me, because it was on the same conversation, because since he was late, I had also called him and texted him when he was there. So I went back, like I said, it was in the same conversation, and we also have the paper documentation as well. And I looked at my phone, verified it was in fact the 17th. And
Did you didn't have to go look for that documentation?
No,
At some
we keep-
later date?
no, we keep a file and on our offenders, that's from the time they start probation. If they're supervised at whether multiple officers or multiple counties, that file follows them.
So you only had one conversation with Officer Wilson, is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
Did you send him any emails or anything else like
I
that?
sent him an email with the sheet that had when he reported on the 17th.
And did you say you wanted to correct your what you told him earlier?
I don't have that email in front of me. It's been 2 years ago. I don't recall what I said.
But it's possible.
Potentially, but I'm pretty sure it happened with the conversation initially, because when he asked me, it was specifically about that date, and he told me there was an investigation going on.
Mr. Tetherow lives in Grundy County, is that correct?
I believe that's where it was.
So he traveled 3.5 hours to be supervised in Campbell County, correct?
Yes, sir.
He never lived in Campbell County.
I'm not sure if he ever lived there. When I supervised him, he was not living in Campbell County.
Okay. You're supposed to keep track of your probations, correct?
Yes, sir.
And are you aware of whether or not he ever lived in Campbell County within a couple of months prior to you supervising him?
I would have to look at the record to find out what his address was reported on his reporting form.
Do you have those notes with you?
That file is actually in Clinton, Tennessee, because we were trying to get it, because originally I was supposed to be here on Thursday. So that file is in Clinton, Tennessee, but we have it, yes.
Okay, so, but you came to testify and didn't bring it here, correct?
I apologize, I couldn't hear you.
Probation can be transferred, correct?
It can.
And in fact, it was done in this case.
We got to object to the relevancy.
I didn't really get the question. I didn't get the complete objection, but first initial question was his probation can be transferred, and then it was. Yes, supervision.
How's that?
Well, Judge, it goes to his alibi. I think ultimately he was back in Grundy County and.
I'll suspend objection. Next question.
What was Mr. Tetherow on probation for?
Object to the relevancy.
Why is that wrong?
Credibility, Judge.
Who's critical?
Well, Judge, credibility of the motive for the investigation or lack thereof.
I'll suspend objection.
Did you say you received emails from him?
From Mr. Tetherow?
Yes.
I did not say that, no.
I have no further questions.
I have nothing further this witness. No further questions.
Sir, you step down. Please step down.
Our next witness would be Lisa Burgee from the Crime Lab. Could I have about 10 minutes just to organize some of this evidence? I think that would make it move a little faster.
That's fine. It is. Okay. What we'll do is we'll step down, take a break for 10 minutes, then I'll call you back in.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, Mr. Drew.